Now Entering Hagerstown is presented by Braun Companies, Willow Springs Restaurant, Town of Hagerstown, Willie and Reds, Burns Corporation, Nettle Creek Hardware, Iron Gate Creative, Ledgerwood Home Restoration, and Tedco, with additional support from Abbott's Candies, The Boot Box, The Logo Shop, C.W. Lamar Registered Architect, Schaefer Show Cattle, Meyer Plastics, Dan Davis Edward Jones, Perfect Circle Credit Union, and Three Rivers. Located in Wayne County, Hagerstown is a quintessential small town full of tradition, innovation, and charm. Named after Hagerstown, Maryland, where many of its first settlers came from, Hagerstown grew throughout the 19th century with the first school in the area, new businesses and mills, and a new post office, and expanded quickly in the early 20th century. In 2017, it was able to attain the honor of receiving Main Street status. With an award-winning library, a beautiful park system, and a forward-thinking school system, Hagerstown is a great place to call home. You are now entering Hagerstown.
I don't know who else is as interested as I am, but I've always just been fascinated with the history of the school. I love hearing the stories that my dad and uncles tell, and even that my grandfather, because my grandparents went there as well. Over the last 20 years, I would say I've spent a significant amount of time collecting as many Hagerstown yearbooks, called The Epitome, as I possibly could. And I'm proud to say that my collection now has 101 years worth of these yearbooks. There's only 4 that I'm missing. As I went through and started researching, I found that Hagerstown had several very renowned and prominent graduates. Nobody more profound than Ralph Teeter, who graduated in 1908. Of course, you've probably heard how amazing he was as an inventor and an engineer and thinking outside the box. But what isn't always known is that he was also an avid philanthropist and offered enormous amounts of not just money, but of time. He was born in 1890. We built our current high school in 1971, and he was involved in that project. He was on the building commission. He was in his 80s or early 80s, and then still lived another 10 or 11 years. So this guy loved Hagerstown the way that I think you're supposed to love it, you know. Other interesting and significant graduates could include Clarkson Davis Whistler, graduate of the class of 1887, who was a world-renowned anthropologist and is credited with being the first person to suggest that culture and environment affect human behavior. John Seffrin, class of 1962, CEO of the American Cancer Society. Rear Admiral John Shaw, class of 1956, 35 years in the U.S. Navy. Ruth Dutro, one of my favorites, 1923. Ruth was a career educator in our schools. She was never married and left her entire estate to the town of Hagerstown. Then we have Mr. Hagerstown, Don McCullough, class of, 1933. Don was extremely political and had no problem with it. I am very proud to say that I was present and got to witness him receive the Sagamore of the Wabash. More recently, even, we have Richard Federico, class of 1995. He was recently appointed to the United States Circuit Court by President Biden, and confirmed overwhelmingly by the United States Senate. Melissa Greenwell, class of 1985, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer for Finish Line. Oh, Grant Mendenhall, class of 1982. Grant served as Special Agent in charge of the Indiana FBI. Respected cartoonist John Carter, class of 1989. My good friend Terry Hobbs, class of 1977, who represented the United States wrestling team when they traveled to Iran. Jane Bruns, class of 1984, the CEO of Ortho Indy. Then we have Chris Jarrett, class of 2006, and Cole Bartlett, class of 2013, who were both drafted by the Arizona Diamondbacks and both had careers in minor league baseball. And lastly, very interesting, was Trevor Andis, the class of 2015, who was recently on the Indy 500 championship racing team. I do think that is something unique about Hagerstown in that the school is the center of the community. Okay, it's the social hub. It's where everybody gets together, and whether it be a ball game or state fair band day or an FFA event, this community never fails to rally around its youth. So I've been other places. I just can't imagine living anywhere else. It is a great place to raise kids, and I cannot even imagine allowing my kids to go to any other school.
Bob Hansen. I was the editor of the Hagerstown Exponent for 13 years, which was a weekly paper here. And I've continued as a reporter for other publications and an editor for other publications since then. I'm here to talk about the Hagerstown Fair and how it's continued since, not the fair itself, but how it's continued since 1890 and has become what we now call Jubilee Days, which is our town festival in the middle of August. Jubilee Days is held on the third weekend in August every year. They adopted the name in about 1953. Before that, it was kind of an agricultural fair. Kids, the farm kids could bring their corn and their wheat and have shows up in the old high school. Then in 1953, that may be when the Lions Club, the Hagerstown Lions Club, took over running the festival, which at that point they had a big fish fry and a parade and so on. One of the bigger events during Jubilee Days is the parade. It comes from the high school up on the north end of town all the way through town on Main Street. This year it lasted about an hour and a half. Oftentimes there'll be, of course it's led by the fire departments, their trucks and sirens and so on, but then there'll be different units. A lot of the Hagerstown High School graduates come back for reunions on that weekend. This year there was a golf cart and 2 people in it from the class of 1953. You got to think, that's 70 years ago. So that's pretty neat that 2 of them were able to be with us. And there were, just lots of other people, horse units, people riding on top of trucks, just all kinds of things go on. But then the biggest feature probably is there's they call it a festival market. It's kind of like a flea market that goes for 3 or 4 blocks on one of the streets. They sell all kinds of odd stuff. And there's food booths, food trucks. There's usually also some entertainment in the tent. There'll be local bands, magicians. So that's about the parade in Jubilee Days. It's not a huge festival, but it's a lot of fun. And it's kind of the highlight of the year for a lot of us here in Hagerstown. I love Hagerstown largely because when we came here, It was clean, it is clean, it's a nice clean town. We have a great school system where the kids are cared for very well at the schools, and the schools perform well academically, good sports teams. There's plenty to do. If you move to Hagerstown and you want to be involved in activities, it's very easy to get involved. It's just a good place to be.
My name is Geraldine Bond. Well, I was a Worley before that, and that was W-O-R-L-E-Y, and I am B-O-N-D now. So I went from the bottom of the alphabet up to the top. My grandfather was Dr. O.P. Worley, and we lived in the house that's right next to the post office, and that's where I was born. He delivered me, and at the time, he told everybody it's gonna be a boy. But I turned out to be a girl. He had me named Jerry, but they changed it to Geraldine. And I did not walk until I was 2 years old. My grandfather had passed away when I was 2, so I really do not remember him, only the pictures. And my dad was the town marshal and the fire chief. The fire station and the police station were together. You'd walk through one door into the jail and into the other door for the fireplace. The bank was right next to us, so upstairs is where we lived. We had our phone, we had the bank alarm, we had the police phone, the fire phone, so we had many phones to answer. We were in the fur, wool, and ginseng business. And when my husband died, it was $900 a pound is what we were paying for dry ginseng. It takes 4 ginseng plants to make one dry ginseng to sell. For 58 years, we were the only ones around that got the coon and your muskrats and possums. They skinned them out. We had hangers, and we'd stretch them out, scrape them, put them on the hangers for them to dry, and we had buyers from Germany and England come over, and I would pick them up at Dayton Airport, and they'd come over for about 2 years to buy our furs. And then when the animal rights thing started in Europe and bombed their places, we no longer dealt with them. Also, the wool business, we were the second largest wool buyer in the state of Indiana. And now there's only one woolen mill, and that's in South Carolina. We used to take wool up to Wisconsin and then go fishing. I love Hagerstown because the school is small, they treat everybody the same, and you can always have somebody that will help you. All you have to do is let them know.
We have 4 buildings associated with lodges in Hagerstown. The one I'll focus on mainly is the Independent Order of Oddfellows building, the IOOF Hall, built in 1880. Sits on Main Street, the tallest building in Hagerstown. The Oddfellow chapter here began about 1845-46. The building was built in 1880. They represented a lot. They were the philanthropic group that we would call them today, but they had a mantra that they wanted to operate under the guise of love, friendship, and truth. And they did that by educating the orphans, visiting the sick, relieving the distressed, and burying the dead. When they began in 1845, the population was probably in 600 to 800 category. They had nearly 140 members, so it was quite a large percentage of the population were members of the Oddfellows. In 1845, they were all male. That's true. I think it was in the 1870s, they had a female arm called the Rebecca Lodge, and they were as philanthropic as the male counterpart, and they did a lot of the same things. They made meals for a lot of organizations here in town. I was 17 years old when we moved to Hagerstown. At 18 years old, I had one of the Odd Fellows recruit me to be an Odd Fellow. It was interesting. I remember vaguely some of the things that went on. There was a door up there with a round disc that uncovers a hole. You would go in and knock on the door. They would uncover the hole and say, "Who goes there?" And you would say your name and your position and lodge, and then they would let you in. As I said, I came here at 17 years old, and I felt embraced as a brother, as just a compatriot of Hagerstown right away.
Oh, there was cotton mills, woolen mills, of course, grain mills and oil mills, all the various sawmills, all the various things that need to build a village. I'm Bill Stockberger, and I'm a local history fanatic and collector. The books say that there was over 260 mills in this area, which is actually the most in the country besides New York, the state of New York. Wayne County and Hagerstown had over 260 mills. Actually, where I live, there's a little stream called Flight Run or Mill Run, and there was 4 mills on that little stream. So a lot of the pioneers were taking advantage of all the water resource for what it took to run these mills. Poplar Grove was a mill, also called the Teeter Mill out here, what people refer to as Teetertown. It was operated until 1912, and when they closed down Poplar Grove, the owner said that people are simply buying their bread these days instead of needing the flour to make their own bread, which kind of was the end of the mill industry in Hagerstown and the need for that. This is a 3-foot wide wool blanket that was produced at the Test Woolen Mills on the White Branch. Ruth Dutro is a very famous citizen from Hagerstown, and she donated this one here, or one just like this, to the museum, and so this thing's probably 150 years old. From what I understand, the Salem Baptist Church was probably the first, and around 1822 or 1832, it's east of town. Still standing, they still have meetings in there, but Methodists and Quakers were coming in also, but the one that was kind of significant was the Brethren, which was the German Baptist Brethren, and they come over here and they started meeting around 1820, 1830, holding worship in just valleys and groves outside and prairies, or they get in a barn if they could, or a house. But they found the need to buy land on what's called now Brick Church Road south of town, and that's where the Brick Church stands. And it grew so fast that they needed to build 2 more churches, the White Branch north of town 5 miles, and then Locust Grove 3 miles south. And they bought the Olive Branch Church off the Methodist north of town and used it for services. And there was another one on Hoover Road called the Maple Grove Church of the Brethren. So the Brethren denomination really dominated in those days around the turn of the century, and their numbers grew more than other denominations did. Lewis Teeter was a cousin of the famous Teeters that did the piston rings and the cruise control, but Lewis was brought up in Teetertown just like the rest of them, and was fascinated with machinery and repairing mechanics, and He actually had the first metal lathe in Hagerstown. He repaired sewing machines and engines, and he could just about fix anything. But as he grew, he developed a strong hunger to serve God and decided to focus on his faith. He became an elder and the pastor of the Brick Church out here over 30 years. He got very involved in the Manchester College, Northern Indiana. He was a trustee, and he held several positions with the Brethren denomination and was like their moderator and their trustee, and he was big in missions. And it is written that he was the guy to go to when you had a wedding or a funeral or needed counseling, and he was just like the neighborhood friend that was always there for people. The thing that I think is pretty intriguing was he had such a strong desire to teach people God's Word that he actually wrote a New Testament commentary. From Hagerstown, this guy wrote a New Testament commentary. He wanted to live on only the basic needs that he had. He didn't want anything fancy, no, fancy car, nothing like that. He just wanted to serve God and serve the community. It doesn't surprise me when I get a photograph of a group of people. Lewis Teeters is in the photograph somewhere hanging out with the crowd. And you can look at Hagerstown and see how the Perfect Circle and the mills really helped develop this town. But to measure somebody's spiritual impact on a town is kind of hard to measure that. I love Hagerstown because I was born and raised here. It's my heritage. I'm intrigued with the history. I like the people.
I'm Chris Lamar. I'm the town manager here at Hagerstown, Indiana. I've been in this position now for 10 years.
I'm Mary Ellen Lamar, a resident of Hagerstown area, and I retired school teacher.
So from what I've studied here, the original purchase was in 1809 from the Indians. It was called the 12-mile purchase, and Hagerstown lies on the western boundary of what was originally the 12-mile purchase. Then in the 1820s, more settlers started moving here from Hagerstown, Maryland, and in 1832 the town was platted and recorded, and at that time it was renamed to Hagerstown, Indiana. I think when we have a major event such as the Sesquicentennial, it's interesting to get people all together from different demographic backgrounds. I think it's a time when we can all kind of come together on a common ground.
They're just all proud. I have a community pride.
In 1982, it was the main part of the Sesquicentennial celebration was from August 8th through 14th, but it seemed like the whole year of 1982 was basically a preparation for that. A lot of the men in the community started growing out beards, and they were the big, full Abraham Lincoln type beard. They weren't just a little beard like what I've got, but that was something that started happening.
One of the things that happened at the end of this Sesquicentennial was all the people that are growing the beards went behind the post office and had them shaved off. My husband was one of them, and he had his beard shaved off. And some of the people were so shocked at how he looked because they'd never seen him without a beard.
And we started preparing for the Sesquicentennial pageant, which was a very long production. If I'm remembering, the running time was like an hour and a half or 2 hours long, and that was an event that was held down at our football field. So there were preparations that took place for that. It was really a unique event. We had the main headquarters was set up underneath our museum in one of the lease spaces down there, and they sold vintage dresses and vests and hats and garters and all kinds of period clothing from the early 1800s. Another thing that was really unique about Hagerstown is that the Amish did not live in Hagerstown in 1982. They did not start coming until the 1990s, but there were probably, I don't know, Mom, would you say 9 or 10 people here in Hagerstown, including my dad, that were into horses and mules and that kind of thing. So it really made the pageant more realistic and a lot more special by having people that actually had horses and wagons here in town. So during the Sesquicentennial pageant, I was cast as the ornery school kid that came in late to class, and the teacher paddled me and put a dunce hat on me and made me sit in the corner. And then during show and tell time, I brought in a jar of bumblebees and released that to the entire classroom, and they all went running off the stage. So that was kind of my little claim to fame. One thing that was really neat at the end of the Sesquicentennial pageant is everyone went out and was waving United States flags around on the football field, which was really awesome. And then that was followed by a really long fireworks show. I think the way the Sesquicentennial pageant was done was really interesting in that it highlighted every decade from the 1830s to the present day, which was 1982 at the time. And that's something that I would like to build upon going forward to the bicentennial, possibly have another pageant similar to that, and just try to figure out how we would highlight the decades. I think that, if I'm remembering right, Mom, wasn't there a dance from almost each of those decades, that some kind of square dance or some kind of, there was the 1950s.
I don't remember how many dances there were, but there were a lot of dances.
I would say it's a very close community, and I'm finding out more and more about people that live here, or people that lived here in the past. As town manager, I get to work with a lot of them on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I feel like everyone becomes my friend. I have good relationships with a lot of the people. It's interesting finding out more and more about the people all the time.
If you would like to see your town featured on the Now Entering series, please visit ballstatepbs.org/Now Entering for more information. To become a member of Ball State PBS and receive your DVD copy of Now Entering Hagerstown, call 800-252-9472 or go online at ballstatepbs.org.